Hello, hello, hello. How are you doing, Miss Sabs? How's it going? Hey, Cece, how are you? I am just about all set up. Let's see. I think I have everything that I need. Good evening, good evening. Almost into the night. Ooh, this is going to be fuzzy. Should have picked a different one. Okay. So I showed this picture in my videos, and so this is a patchwork quilt. So, or a patchwork quilted pillow cover. And we are working on this week, as a part of the Black Sewing Network, we are working on new, easy, newbie projects. And so there are a ton of folks who have received sewing machines for the holidays. Hey, Anna. They received sewing machines for the holidays and they want to get started, or it's your New Year's resolution to try something new, like making a quilt. And so there are tons of quilt patterns that you can make. There are easier patterns. There are much more complicated patterns, but they all follow basic moves. And because they all follow basic moves, if we break those down into smaller pieces, then we're able to learn how to do the smaller pieces in order to be able to do the big thing at the end. So last week, we focused on the half square triangle. And that is a normal block that you will find, or a piece of a block that you will find in quilting. It's what helps to make the points for our stars, for our houses, for hourglasses, and other things like that. But we decided to dial it back a little this week. And this week we're looking at, thank you for the roses, we're looking at patchwork. Because patchwork, if you mix and match it a lot, you can get these really cool quilts that don't take a lot of effort. What I also like about patchwork is that depending on what you do, you don't have to match up seams if you stagger it. So for what we're working on today with the pillowcase or the pillow cover, I have to match up my seams. So every seam, as much as I best can do, they match up. And the better the match up, the better. But sometimes you don't want them to match up. And they don't have to, because you can stagger them so that, for example, and it requires some cutting, but for example, if I can, get my little greasy fingers that were ashy a minute ago when I put lotion on them these to come apart. But if I take these and instead of lining everything up like this, because that's all the seams matching up, if I shift them like a brick pattern, now none of the seams match. And that's less intimidating for people who are learning how to quilt. Hey, Miss Belinda. Hi, Ginger. This is less intimidating for people who are learning how to quilt, because now you're not worried about those seams matching at any point. You're just lining everything up end to end, and then you don't have to worry about that. It's totally up to you how you want to go with doing the patchwork. But just so you know, that's why patchwork is just a little easier than working with half square triangles. So what I have done, I've made a quilt, and I can't share it with you just yet because it was a pattern test. It is finally finished. And I am so excited with how it came out. and I can't wait to eventually share it. I will probably quilt it this week. If not this week, it'll be next week. And I think the pattern is coming out, I want to say late January, early February. And when it does, I'll be able to share it with you. So we're going to work on the patchwork for the pillow first. I suggested get all your scraps. You could use regular yardage that you have and cut that up as well. It's totally up to you. I like to get my scraps at some point and create these piles. And then when I'm ready to use them, I can make whatever project I need to make. The more of these that I have, the bigger the project, or the more projects I can do. I can make tote bags, which I've made out of patches. I have made actual quilts out of them. And in this case, we're making the pillow cover. Our pillow cover is going to be 16 patch. So what is a patch? We consider 1 square to be a patch. We're using 5-inch squares. Thank you. Thank you, RV. We're using 5-inch squares, and these I've already pre-cut. We better know these as charm pack squares. Charm packs are 5 inches square, but I made my own charm pack. I didn't buy one. After I cut everything 5 inches square, and I just keep saying square because it's 5 on the length and the width, we then decide on the layout for this. I am going with a 4x4. And I can mix and match this any way that I want to get that pattern. Depending on how many colors I have, that will determine how scrappy this will be. I may decide to use light and dark colors. Again, it depends on the fabrics that I have. What I try to do, if nothing else, and these are all like the purples that I had from the quilt that I made, is I'm trying not, if I can help it, to have certain colors touch. So if I can avoid those colors touching, that's the only thing I really care about with the scrappiness of this quilt pattern that I am creating. So it's totally up to you what you want this to look like. You can decide the rows that everything falls in. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for the follow. And we're going to put that there. And I think, nope, can't use that. Where is, I know what color I want to use. I just need to find it. And I should have more than one. Oh, that's interesting. I think this is, that Stonehenge is too Stonehenge-ish for where I have it. So we're going to move this one up here, down here. There we go. That'll work. Okay. And I have 2 whites in the same row. Don't want that. So we're just playing around with the box, determining the layouts. I'm not worried about them touching this way. I just don't want one on top of the other or one next to the other. So I determined my layout. If I'm happy with it, I'm going to go with it. If I'm not, I'm going to continue to play with my fabrics. What I am not liking right now is the white. It's not working for me. So I think I'm going to pull the white out. And let's try a different color. And again, with the colors that I have, I'm just pulling them out and trying to decide. I don't mind the black so much, but the white is just not working for me. But if I care that it matches the quilt, then I would rearrange it that way. So I am trying as much as possible to get darks next to lights. So that would work for me as well. So we know that's not going to work. And let's put that dark there. That'll work right there. Okay, we'll switch this here. And let's find one more. And again, this is just scrappy. If I decided to go with some different colors, I could absolutely make this out to be as coordinated as I would love it to be. That is totally up to you, how you want this to go. And I am just flip-flopping some of these around to make some decisions for where I want this to land. Let's pull this one out and we can put this one in. Okay. Hello, 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 everyone. We are working on just setting the scene for my patchwork pillow cover. And so I am working on the block layout. The only thing that I am interested in is making sure that my colors are not on top or next to each other. I don't care if they are on a diagonal. I just care that they are not next to each other or on top. I tried as much as possible to put darks next to lights. But again, that's totally up to you. So I have everything laid out the way that I want it to go. And we're going to talk about two different ways to stitch these together. So when we stitch for quilting, we are stitching at 1/4 inch. How you group these together is up to you. I can sew these row by row by row by row, and then attach the rows. Or I can attach these in sections that will make a bigger square. So I can attach these together, these together, these together, and these together. So instead of doing the rows, which sometimes can stretch out, some people prefer to put them together in units. So then that way there's less stretch. And what it also allows me to do is to resize my blocks if needed. And by what I mean by trim those up a little bit, because sometimes if you're a little wonky with your stitch, this one might be one square. So this might be, let's say, 8 inches square. This one might be 7 and 3/4 inch square, just because of the way that you did it. And this one may be 8 1/4 inches square. It happens. It shouldn't happen, but it happens. And it might not be on the 1/4 inch. It might be more on the 16, but just know that sometimes you could be a little off. And so because of that, this gives us the ability to square it up if we like. So sometimes we prefer to do these in what is called a 4-patch. So here's 1 patch. This is 2 patch. There's no such thing as a 3-patch, and if they're all squares, let me say, but this is the 4-patch. So we can sew these in units of 4 patches, press, do what we need to do. And then when we finish and we now have these 4 units, we'll sew those together as 4 patches. And then that will give us our final block, which will be a 16 patch. So yeah, sometimes, like I said, sometimes we're off. Even with the best of feet, we can be off. Even with the best of measurements, you can be off. Like, it just happens, and you're sitting there, like you said, but the beep happened. And it happens because sometimes we're rushing, sometimes we get a little off beaten trail of the 1/4 inch and it's just a little off. Sometimes it's in the cutting. So sometimes it's how you cut your squares. And so if you're not paying attention, like I do often, you might cut a square a little bit bigger than the other one. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start with my patch and I'm going to section it off and we're going to do 4, 4, 4, and 4. Okay. If I can keep it laid out, I will keep them laid out together. If I can't, I would just stack them in order right on top of these, and then I can just do those units. And I'll show you what I mean. This is my 4 patch that I'm going to sew. What I can do is take those units and stack them like this. They're still, the 4 patches still together. And they look like they don't work right now because of the way that we're laying them out, but they'll be fine. I just need to make sure they're in the same order. And this is what we would do if we had a bigger quilt because not everybody has a big space. So we can put them all together like that. They're still in units. And now what we can do is stitch them together like a 4 patch. Bring my machine over. When I stitch 4 patches, and we've been doing a lot of them lately, I take either my right and flip it to my left or my left and flip it to my right. It doesn't matter which way you go, but be consistent. So I take the first 2. Remember that was a unit that went together. Make sure that my edges are lined up. And I'm taking 1 from the top. And then I'm going to take 1 from the bottom, take it to my machine, and I'm going to do, as the thread came out of the needle, because somebody didn't have enough of a tail there. So let's get it back in there. And one of the easy ways to thread your needle, even though I have a needle threader, is just to take your thread and just clip a real great edge off of that, and it will, boom, go right through the eye of the needle. Okay, one's done. We're going to take the second one, make sure everything is lined up. We're trying to keep these in order because it's going to make all the difference in the world. Because I did lay it out a certain way. We're going to take the next 2, top, bottom, and sew those together. Notice I didn't cut my thread because I'm chain piecing. So I'm creating a chain of patches, one right after the other. And I do them one at a time so I remember the order. This will save me a lot of aggravation later because when you mix it up and you drop them on the floor and you do everything else, you can be mad at yourself that they fell out of order. I will also say that sometimes I will absolutely take a picture of the layout just so that I can go back and look at it to make sure that it's supposed to do what it's supposed to do. Okay, we're on the 3rd set. And again, we're making sure that everything lines up. So we get the best possible seams. I'm going to make sure I turn my iron on. It's been sitting for a minute. I am using a 1/4 inch foot. So the 1/4 inch foot allows my fabric to ride right along the metal part or the wall of that foot so that as I'm stitching, it's not veering out this way, hopefully, because I'm paying attention to that, and it's not veering underneath the foot to give me a different seam. So if it rides right along that foot, it should give me the seam that I want, which is a 1/4 inch. Okay, the last 2. So I'm now creating 2 patches. So they are 2 by 2. I mean, I'm sorry, one by one plus one, which is 2. They're not 2 by 2. 2 by 2 is when we get a 4 patch. And the great thing is that this comes together quickly. Because it's only 16 blocks. Let me get that up out of there. Somebody doesn't have enough thread. Somebody did not want the thread. And so here's our chain, right? So we did our chain piecing. Remember, I did these in units. So the first 2 are a unit. So I'm not going to snip between the 2. I'm going to snip after the 2. So I keep the units together. Okay. Take the next 2, snip after the second one. So I keep the units together. And they may be out of order, but when I go to put these back together, I will make them fit. So I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about these 4 being together because I know that they will fit after that. Okay. And again, this layout is up to you. So you're choosing the layout. This is not a pattern for the layout. This is just how I eyeballed it and decided that everything should go together. Okay, so this isn't again the order because you see these 2 were together and that's not the way I laid it out, and that's fine. Okay, so hi Rebecca, how are you doing? I'm gonna flip these over, this one, and right now the seams are standing straight up. In whatever world you live in, these seams can be opened up like this if you prefer, or we like to say stitching to the dark side. If you stitch to the dark side, what happens is it creates like a little hump because the majority of the fabric is on this side and there's really only 1 layer of fabric on this side. The 2 layers that make up the seam are going to this side. So there's going to be a lot more bulk on here. And what happens is when people say they nest the seams, one seam is going in one direction, the other one's going the other. When they line up, they lock in. And that helps us to get those perfect points in those corners. Some people don't like that because when you're quilting it, there's a hump. And they want everything to be as even as they possibly can get it. It's up to you. So you can decide whether you want to open those up, and that means that it's now even. I have a layer here and a layer here, a layer here and a layer here. Or if I want them to one side, which means I only have 1 layer on this side of the seam, but I have 3 on this side. That is personal preference. Okay? But either way that you decide to do it, your seams really should be pressed. I can finger press them if that's what I choose to do, and then take them to my machine later. I'm going to leave these open, and I'm going to line my seams up. Remember, they were chained together, so these are still together as a chain. And I'm going to take the time to make sure that my seams align. If it's not perfect, nobody's going to notice for the most part, but you want it close enough to perfection. The closer it is to perfection, the less likely you're going to see it. If you are way off, we're going to see that. So you can see that gap in there. If I am closer, but I didn't win the toss, you can't tell the difference. So you want them as close as possible. What I like to do is take them, line them up, get them all nice and flat, and I like to use a clip to hold it in place. So again, I can finger press. I have a tool to roll and press it. It's upstairs, but that's okay. I can use my fingers to press. And I'm just holding that seam down. The only place that it really matters is right at the tip, because this is where I'm stitching everything together. I'm taking my time to make sure that those seams are as close together as they possibly can. And then I clip. And we only have 4 of these. So remember, we started off with 16 blocks. Now we've sewn them together into 2s or pairs. And so now we have 8 units. So we're taking the 8 units in those pairs and we're placing the pairs together. So 2 times 2 is 4. So we are creating a 2 patches equal a 4 patch. Hey, how are you doing? So what? How's it going? Hello, hello, everyone. Again, welcome in. We are working on a patchwork pillowcase cover, and we're keeping it small, right? Because we wanted to go over the techniques. We wanted to do a couple different things this evening, and to make a whole quilt, yeah, all we would have gotten done is the quilt. There are other methods to use to doing the blocks, and I'll be doing those later in the week. But right now we are using all scraps. So this is a purple quilt that I just finished making. And I had all this fabric left over. I cut them down into 5-inch blocks. And I am now sewing them together to make this patchwork. Okay, so here are my 4 what will now be new units once I stitch these together. And I am going to take it back to my machine. Somebody's going to have to make a bobbin. Okay. And we're going to stitch, again, that 1/4 of an inch. When I go over the seam, I like to go slow. And then off the seam, I can speed it up just a little. I'm going to chain piece those again, so I'm not going to break the stitches just yet. And it doesn't matter for this part, but it just batch sewing or batch stitching just tends to help to speed up the process a little. And so that's why I prefer to do it this way. Okay, these techniques are the same things. Like if you're looking at all of your scraps and you took the time while you were watching TV to cut up all of those 5-inch, to cut up all those scraps into 5-inch squares, you absolutely could use the same process to make a bigger piece for a table runner, placemats, a baby quilt, a throw, a big quilt. You could use it because really what we're doing is creating a new type of fabric, as my friend Coco would say, and you could use that piece to create bags. If you put enough patchwork together, you can make a patchwork coat. So the possibilities are endless. It is a quilting technique, but it doesn't have to end up being a quilt. Okay. So now we have those units together, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we can snip these apart. So we have taken this down from 16 to 8 to 4. We're going to go from 4 to 2 to 1, but it's time to press. When I created these blocks, when I created the quilt, I did a lot of starching and prepping beforehand. So these fabrics, don't necessarily need a lot of starch or any sort of spray, but if you feel like you need to pop it just a little bit, knock yourself out. But I did some prep beforehand. Okay, good job. Get that to hold down a little bit. And then this one, remember we already finger pressed these open. That's why that was easier and open. So now I just need to finger press this one open and then give that a press. You don't need to do a lot of ironing. Ironing is moving the iron around your fabric. You could just press it. So then that way you're not really distorting your fabric. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for the follows, and thank you for tapping the screen with the likes as we are almost at 6K. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn that over because sometimes even when I finger press it, sometimes the seams will fold back just a little bit and create a little bit of a fold. And I want to make sure that I get that nice and flat. Remember, we talked about lining those seams up, and you can see how they all meet right there in that center. Okay, so that's 1, 3 more to go. And so you figure, other than talking and explaining, this process really doesn't take long. And it's one of the reasons why I like working with patchwork. And it's also like an easy stash buster when you have that extra fabric. I also like the idea that if there are charm pack quilts and you're not necessarily into the scrappy look, and you decide that, well, I don't want to use the scraps for a quilt, but I can do some things with them before I put them in the abyss of never useness. What you can do is practice. If I am working on a project and it's a technique that I've never used before. Now, that's just me. I'm a little arrogant enough that I'm going to try it with my good fabric. And sometimes I'll buy like an extra 1/4 of a yard to account for the fact that I'm getting ready to mess up. Or I'm back at the store buying another 1/4 yard because I messed up. Either way. So what you can do is use your scraps to make the, as they would call in the garment world, the muslin. So that way you can practice it, see what it's going to look like, and then, you know, get your technique down and then take it to your machine with the regular fabric. So, you know, I'm practicing these, I'm practicing my seams. I can see, okay, that lines up. Like I said, for me, in my little delusional world, I will make the thing. And I figure, first of all, most of the people that I make things for are appreciative of getting something that I made. So they're not worried about the flaws. And I find that typical in the sewing world. Most people aren't worried about the flaws. And somebody said, and it wasn't my quote, but I will quote them, even though I don't remember who said it. The baby is not, if you're making a baby quilt or a toddler or a young child, they're not looking at every place you messed up and saying, you know what, them seams don't line up. That I reserve that for my mama. My mama was critical like that. But nobody else is critical. So they're not looking to see that everything you had didn't line up. Thank you. Thank you for sending your daily heart me. How are you doing, Carmen? Hello from Phoenix. How are you doing? Okay. So here we are. And again, we have these now, and they are now in 4 patch units. Okay, and I can play around with that just a little bit to get my thing back together, and I'll rework some of this, but they're in their 4 patch units. So again, instead of doing these row by row, as some people would do, and then trying to stretch it and put it together, I prefer to create the units, and then if those units don't measure up, and you can use your cutting mat to see that, or you can use your ruler. But for the most part, I can eyeball it and see if there are any issues. If there are no issues, now it's time to kind of reconstruct this back together the way it should be. And I'm looking to make sure that there is nothing touching that shouldn't be touching. If it is touching, then I'm just moving it around a little bit so that it doesn't touch. And then there were some other things that I did as well, and I'm just making sure that that doesn't occur as well. So this is the last time that I am going to be able to make these work however they're going to work. I'm going to decide on my layout because now it is what it is. Again, this is scrappy. I'm not worried about perfection. It is going to sit on the pillow. Hello and welcome from Canada, in Canada. Thank you, thank you. I've been to Canada twice, once to Niagara Falls and once to Nova Scotia. And I absolutely loved it. Okay. And again, I can just kind of play with this. And golly knows how I put this together because I can't see it, but that's okay. We, like Tim Gunn says, make it work. Okay, I don't like that one there. Okay, so we're gonna leave it like that. 4 patch, remember, how do we put our 4 patches together? Flipped either right to left or left to right. We're going to take our seams and line them up. So I'm making sure that those seams are aligned. And this can be done with 2 colors or 16 colors. It is totally up to you to decide how many repeats you want to have and how scrappy you want it to be. We'll take this back to our machine and we're going to stitch both of those yarns. I'm going to make sure that my ends are together. We know that this is clipped in the middle and we can take it to the machine and we're going to do a 1/4 inch. Ooh, and I've made one disappearing 9 patch out of purple, speaking of that, lining the seams up. And I will be doing another video for just the disappearing 9 patch and some different disappearing 9 patches that, like, they all don't have to be cut the same way, but it is one of my faves. I love the fact that you can cut it up and get different units. Line everything up, take it to our machine, and stitch. I am using for this pillow 5-inch squares. That will yield me in side by side. I'm using 4 of them, so side by side, that's 20. So 20 inches, right? We know that it is not 20 inches complete because you have to stitch them together and you have seam allowance. There is a 1/4 inch on this side and a 1/4 inch on this side. 1/4 plus a 1/4 is a 1/2. So in this seam allowance, from those blocks, I am losing a 1/2 inch. So if this is 5 and this is 5, losing a 1/2 inch, this should be 9 1/2. Oops. Let's do this up top so that, you know, we can kind of show that a little bit. So this should be 9 1/2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then this is a 1/2. So we have 9 1/2 inch blocks that came from these. When we put the 2 9 1/2s together and we add those up, it comes to 18 plus the halves, 19 inches. But again, we lose a 1/2 inch from that seam. So it should be 18 1/2 inches. So when we finish this, this should be 18.5 inches square. When I am picking what I'm doing, I'm thinking about what that end result needs to be, because then that determines everything else. That's why we rely on patterns, because somebody has done the math for us and we don't have to do the math ourselves. But this should be 18.5 inches unfinished. And that means that we haven't sewn around the edges to lose those, but it's at least 18.5 inches unfinished. So 18.5 inches unfinished, a 1/4 inch on this side. If this were finished, a 1/4 inch on this side, the whole thing would be 18 inches square finished if I do a 1/4 inch. If I do more than a 1/4 inch, if I do a 1/2 inch, then I'm going to lose an inch all the way around. So then it would be 17.5 inches square. So you would just have to do a little bit of math for yourself if you are looking to determine what you need, or you can just eyeball it and measure it and pray for the best. But I do try to believe in accuracy as much as I possibly can. I'm just finger pressing these open. And once I finger press them open, I can either take them to the machine and press, or I can wait till the end. I want to make sure that these two are at least flat enough so that I can stitch everything together and then press it at the end. But again, that's up to you. I'm going to take my 2 seams, bring these together. We're down from 2 units, getting ready to come to the 1. One of the things that somebody suggested for another technique, they were using strips instead of blocks, like the jelly roll strips, to make a jacket. And one of the things that they said is because they were making the jacket to strengthen the seams, they would have serged it instead of just using a regular machine. And I haven't done that yet completely, but I agreed with what they said. If I am quilting it, I may not be as worried about serging it, but if I need to worry about the weakening of the seam, either I want a wider seam just to make sure that it doesn't pull apart, or the serging would help to secure it. But that's if you're making garments more than if you're making a quilt or a quilted project. Okay, everything is together. I clipped at all the seams. And I'll take this back to my machine and pray that I have enough thread in that bobbin to make it all the way through. The key to this is slow and steady. And in some cases, you'll see where I zip through it and you're like, okay, she said slow and steady. But it really is like, once you get the hang of it, you can pick up that speed just a little bit, but the accuracy matters, especially if you're trying to line everything up and you want to make sure that your seams are what they're supposed to be. So if you don't have a handle on that fabric, go slow. Okay, we made it, and we have just a little bit of thread left there. Okay, so we're going to open that up, and we are going to press. You know what? I've got to change the thread anyway for what I'm going to do next. So that's fine. And we're just going to press with our finger just to open that up. And then we're going to take it to the iron and press all of those middle seams so that they lay nice and flat. Okay. Hey, Will, how are you doing, darling? Okay. Now, what I do, one of the things that I like about this, as Will comes in, because this is like this, he is the I get rid of scrap king for me. And this is like an easy project. Like when he's making his pillows out of scraps, he can absolutely take all of that Ankara fabric that he has and make that patchwork quilt will out of that Ankara, and then still use, because what's inside of here are all my scraps. So, but my scraps don't look like Will scraps because my scraps are true scraps. Will scraps are fabric that can be used. That's what I say, because they're still bigger than what I have. But to each his own, because some people are not dealing with that small stuff. I am. Okay, did I do that side? Yeah, I did, but I'm gonna press that down just a little bit more. So you can kind of see, like sometimes I just like the back of the quilt the same way I like the front of the quilt. Thank you, Cynthia. Okay. So just so you know, just for Will's purpose, right? These are my scraps. So when I have scraps, like, you can't do nothing else with these. And real wrap quilters, oh, we could do something else with this. So we can absolutely use these. What I do is I take these, and then these are what goes into my thank you. What I do is I put these, hey, Melinda, what I do is I put these into my quilts, into my pillows, and then they become the scrap for the pillow. So that's the batting, that's everything else. Okay. So everything is hopefully nice and flat. If I do the measurement on my cutting mat, then I should have 4 to 22 is 18, and then an extra ½ inches. So this is 18.5 inches. Same way, if I measure up, I should be able to get up to 18, and I can see that is at the ½ inch mark. So this should be 18.5 inches. Now it might be a tad bit off here and there, but for the most part, I can see from this that this is 18.5 inches, just about square. So what I suggested for this is to use a piece of batting. This is scrap batting that I have from a fabric store. And you measure the batting a little bit bigger than your quilt top. And this is one of the reasons why I went with a pillow-ish type of activity today, because you could see the whole process. So this is the quilt top, if you will. This is the batting, and then there should be a backing. Now, it's totally up to you, depending on the type of batting you have, if you want to put a backing with it. So a backing, if I'm doing a pillow, you're going to see this and the back of the pillow. You're not going to see this because it's going to be in the inside. Currently, I don't take orders. Hey, Shamir. So you're not going to see it. So if you're not going to see it in my world, then it doesn't matter what it looks like. If you're going to see it, then I want to make sure that it looks a certain way. So I may not want to waste my fabric to do this side of it. But again, you need to make sure that you have a good piece of fabric, of batting that you can use that won't get all linty into your machine. So it just depends. But you want to lay everything else nice and flat. There are folks who will get some water and some liquid Elmer's glue, and they will water baste it. They will water the glue down, and then they will spray base with the glue. Game changer. Some people will do it with flour and water, and there's something else like vodka or something like that that they use, and they will use that. And because, when we mix flour and water, it makes like a paste, right? So they'll use that to stick to it, and they spray base with that. There are those of us that go out and buy every new gadget known to man. This is a powder. You sprinkle it all over, you iron it on, and it will stick to your fabric. Somewhere on the floor that I have to go get, there is, no, there's not. It's not on the floor. There are quilting base sprays that you can use as well. Now, don't do as I do, but this is what I do. I spray in the house, but some people are like, "Oh, you need to spray in a well ventilated area." Okay, so I probably have taken a couple years off my life, but it is what it is. I will lift this up, and with my spray base, I don't need a lot. I just want to get enough on there that it will hold this in place. If I'm doing a quilt, I probably need a little bit more. For this, I don't need a lot. And again, if you're a bag person, this is setting this up the same way to create the panels for your bag. So if you are doing something and you want quilting for that bag, it's the same type of method. So I'm just going in a couple different areas. A little bit of spray base. I smooth from the inside out just to get the humps and the bumps out. And that's one of the reasons why, too, we want to make sure that we have this extra all the way around so that we are not, so that if it kind of veers a little bit off to the left or the right, you're still getting the whole thing. Because we'll just trim all of that up at the end or trim it off at the end, but we at least want to make sure that everything is done. I like to flip it over and just kind of push it out on the back just to make sure that everything is nice and flat. One of the things that I do not like about batting is that it will pick up every piece of thread and lint that you have. And so it's going to pick it up. I need to do some changing out of feet and bobbins. This is the foot that I used for my 1/4 inch seam. This is the metal one. You can see that little, whoops, piece, that little wall on the side. I also have this one. It has that same, whoops, little wall on the side. So either one works. Because I'm doing a small project, I can kind of guard the way it's going. So I'm just going to use a regular foot. There is a foot called the walking foot that you can use. The only reason that I'm not going to suggest a walking foot right now is because I'm focused on beginners, and a beginner might not have a walking foot. And I don't want to discourage you from getting something done because you don't have all the things. You can absolutely use a regular foot. Thank you. Okay, so like I have that much white thread left. Okay. These are all of my bobbins for this machine. I have gray, which will absolutely work with most of the things. I could use white, and that's what I use, and you really can't even tell that I use white with the purple. I could get rid of my black. It doesn't matter. If you're not going to see this side, then the color doesn't matter. But sometimes if your tension is off, let me get that. Did I get it? Nope. Nope. Ooh. Nope. I cannot stand this puzzle piece that I cannot seem for the life of me to get today, because I keep, every time I take my finger off of the puzzle, there it is, it slides over. Okay, so I wouldn't recommend, like, if for the quilting sometimes, because sometimes if your tension is just a little bit off or it pulls a little, it's going to pull up through your fabric. So I want to pick something that more than likely you're not going to be able to see if it pulls up. So let's go with gray. So my bobbin can be gray. I need to decide what color I want to use up top. I can go with purple if that's the color that I want to use, or I can go with some other color because, of course, you know, I have all sorts of thread. There are different types of quilting thread that you can use. It is totally up to you which one you want. So I'm going to go with the purple just because. And I'm using the gray because that's the bobbin that I have. If I didn't have a bobbin, I could absolutely use the purple. But since I already have gray, why not use it? It'll free up a bobbin and it'll make life a little bit easier. Thank you. And yet when I go to school, the kids are like, "You're mean." Okay. I'm like, no, I just want the best for you. And I'm fighting for you. Okay. So everything is set up. I am not putting that little backing on there. I'm going to take this to the machine. I am just going to do a line on either side of these. I'm going to use my foot as a guide. So my foot is going to line up with these lines on either side. So I'm going to stitch next to the ditch. I'm not stitching in the ditch. I want to stitch next to the ditch. I'm going to lengthen my stitch a little. Whoops, something popped. I hate when it does that. Okay. And that's okay. That's why it's a scrap project. Let me lengthen that stitch up just a little bit. Okay, that's why it popped. Because I don't want to use this if that's going to do that. The older bobbins, the older threads that I have that little, what do you call it? That little slit. And it got caught in the slit. So we're going to change this because I don't feel like going upstairs to get a different one. And we're not going to fall out this chair by me leaning over. So I'm going to just switch it to gray. So we're going to use gray instead of purple. And to be honest with you, depending on what we're using, you're not even going to see it that much that it's going to matter. And I will get this in here. I'm just going to stitch right over that other one because it wasn't that deep. So we got gray in the bottom and gray in the top. But you weren't going to see that purple anyway, the way that I thought you were. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, I'm going to turn it and stitch on the other side. And I'm just using my foot as the guide right along that seam to stitch my lines. Okay, so you can see right there that stitching. And again, you can't tell it's gray, can you? So there, and again, this is easy, right? I only did 16 blocks. So this process doesn't take long. This works whether you are making a quilt, whether you are making this pillow cover, a table topper, it doesn't matter. But I will say this, if you're making a quilt, you need the throat space or you will be tussling, as my girl Carmen would like to say, with the quilt in that throat space. Okay. And we do have one more column. And again, I'm just using my foot on either side of that seam. And I'm going to quilt this however I like. I'm keeping it basic for tonight, but I'm quilting this however I want. So I'm just doing straight seams on either side. If you decide to do a crosshatch, if you decide that you want it to meander, it would have been nice if I pulled out my table, but I didn't think that I would need it for this short piece, so I didn't pull it out. Okay, let's cut that off for a second. Take a, what do you say, like a station break? We're at the light, okay? So you can see stitches on either side of the seams. So I finished this part. I'm going to flip it and do the same thing. And you can see on the back the stitches, right? Okay, question before I do the next one. Yes, ma'am. Throat space. This is the throat of your machine. So long arms, when people are quilting on those types of machines, specifically for quilting, there is a much wider throat. So there's more space in here, and it's also taller. So it allows you to get the quilt in there. Usually they roll it up because it's on a frame, or you may do it differently if you do a sit down, but this is the space. So if I have a quilt in this space, there's not a lot of room in here to roll up what would be, let's say, a king or queen size quilt. There's not enough throat space in here. So this is the throat. This is, you know, so if you're thinking about quilting long term, you may want a machine that has a wider throat. So you would go into the quilt shops and they would show you different ones and show you, hey, if you don't want to get a long arm, here's a great alternative to that because it has the wider throat space. You can sit down, do simple stitches, meandering. Meandering is just kind of like moving it all around and making squiggly lines. It's like free motion quilting, or you could do those straight lines. So the throat space is the issue. Now, having said that, I just got my long arm, was it the year before last? Before that, I've quilted all my quilts, with the exception of a few, on this machine. So I've done all the way up to a queen size quilt on this machine. It can be done. Like I said, you may not want to do it because, woo, it'll make you meet your maker, because yes. So we're going to do this side, just do these, and then we'll be finished that part. But yeah, it can be done. But that like I said, when I originally got this machine, I was sewing clothes, so I wasn't worried about throat space. Okay, that was just moving like a little too smoothly. I was like, is this sewing? When I started quilting, then I said, oh my goodness, that makes sense about the throat space. And I'm so mad at myself that I didn't have it, but you know, it is what it is. So then I bought a new machine because I called myself getting a machine that, you know, hey, at least it has a wider throat space. And then I just broke down and got a long arm. But it just depends on how many quilts you're going to make, whether that long arm is a true investment for you. If you're not making a lot of quilts, it might not be the investment for you. If you're selling the quilts, the type of long arm you're going to get is also going to matter for you. So you're going to spend a lot more money on your long arm if, you can get a return on investment, because, you'll sell your quilt and that'll pay for the machine. Because these long arm machines, could be like a car payment. I mean, not a car payment. Could be like buying a car. You got a small mortgage on a house. So you really have to decide if that's what you want to do. So again, this is a basic for whether you're making the pillow cover, or whether you are making the quilt. This is the same process. I'm not going to get end to end a lot faster if I'm making a quilt as I am getting for this, but this is how you're working it. So at the very least, if I'm going on either side of the ditch and I am using, or the seam, but we're calling it the ditch. If I'm going on either side of the ditch, I can absolutely use my foot and this will work. I can also stitch in the ditch, which means I can stitch right here in this seam or close to it. I like this look better, so that's why I'm going with this one, but you can choose whatever you like. Like Ron Clark says, you can choose whatever you like. My stitch length is kind of wide, which is why I can sew through that quickly. So I can give this a quick press. But here we are. You can see the quilting on the front. This is what the quilting looks like on the back. Okay. I can run a victory stitch all the way around here to keep everything down if that's what I choose to do. Keyword is choose. But I feel like it's already laying down, so I'm not worried about it. Now, I did say this was 18.5 inches. I might lose some of my width on this because of the squaring up, but that's okay. That's why we'll wait till the end to determine what this final thing is going to be. I am going to take my ruler to square this up, and this means that I'm cutting all this excess off. When I use my ruler, and it doesn't matter again if this is a regular quilt or this, I'm trying to line up with the seam with the ruler. That hopefully guarantees me that I have the same amount of space up top that I do down the bottom. And I'm going to cut the excess off. Nice and clean. I'm going to rotate this towards me so I can line it up with the edge of my cutting mat. And that's just going to help me to look at this and to make sure that everything is nice and straight. Measure twice, cut once. So I'm taking the time to look here to make sure those seams are aligned the way that I want them to. I'm making sure that I'm looking here to see how much I'm cutting off, because I want to get as close to the edge as I possibly can. And let's cut that off. Got a little bit of thread that didn't cut through. Okay, so we have two clean edges. I'm going to rotate this towards me again. Girl, you are still at 18.5 almost. I impress myself sometimes. Okay, so again, we're going to line this up. I'm using my mat as a guide. I'm checking with the ruler just to make sure that the lines line up with the seams as best as I possibly can. And I missed a question. Can you show me a way to make some diagonal lines across my quilts? Okay. Let me do this last one. My suggestion for making something where you're not doing the seam. As you can see, I took the easy way out. The seam was my guide. So I didn't have to do a lot of thinking because all I had to do was line the foot up with the seam and start sewing. If I chose to go in a diagonal, I could use my ruler. I would do end to end, and I can do this using my, let me show you what I'm using. There's this line here on my cutting mat. If I line up this edge and then down here with this edge, right? Those two corners, then I can use my ruler because my ruler is short of my block or my quilt or anything else. But if I line it up, I can get that first straight line, and it should go through all of the squares if I lined it up correctly. And I use some sort of marking tool that can iron off or erase, like chalk that will erase, and I will draw the lines. Now, if I trust myself and I'm not using chalk, because chalk will erase as it rubs up against something else. If I use a pen that I can wash off or rub off or iron off, then I can draw all the lines and then do it. So I would draw the line, right? And then use my ruler to determine each line after that and then draw it. And do the same thing on the other side. It's the easiest way to do it, and it's the less aggravating. Are there a ton of other ways you could do it? Sure. You could get a walking foot, and it has an arm that goes out from the walking foot. You set the seam width, the width of the stitches, and you could do it that way. But I would rather take the time to kind of draw it out, and then that way at least I know how far it can be. Or, and I don't have it here, do I? Nope. Some people will draw the first line and then they can get painter's tape and they will lay the painter's tape out. And if you get the width of painter's tape that you want, you can just lay that painter's tape out. And then once you finish the stitch, you lay the painter's tape out on the next stitch. And you just keep stitching to the side of that painter's tape and just keep reusing it because you can reuse painter's tape. So that's another way to do it. It's a cheap way to do it. So the first line you draw, you stitch the first line. And instead of stitching every line after that, you just lay it out and do the painter's tape. And you can just reuse that same strip to get the width that you want. So I would either draw it or I would use the painter's tape. That's just me. Because like I said, I'm not going to sit there, especially with a big quilt, and draw them lines. That's not going to happen. When I can use one line and then use the painter's tape. Or I can use the walking foot and then the arm for it. There are rulers that you can use as well. But again, depending on where you are in the process, you may not want to spend the money for the ruler, but you will absolutely spend the money for the painter's tape. Because how many of us already have painter's tape somewhere in our house? If you're like me, Little Miss Fix-It, you got plenty of painter's tape. And like I said, you can buy it in different widths. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I will tell you in a minute. What? We'll do that real quick. Okay. So we have this. This is the front of our pillow. We have the back of that pillow. And again, nobody's going to see this. So nobody cares really what this looks like on the inside. But if you do, you can absolutely use any sort of fabric. It doesn't matter. You can use it on the inside to cover up that batting. That's up to you. So I'm not going to tell you that you have to do it a certain way. You can just do it that way. So here is the back of the pillow. Let's come back to this pillow real quick. So here's the pillow. This is the front. This is what I have so far. The back of the pillow, the way that I have this, I've done an envelope style. So that means that one piece of fabric is laid over top of another piece of fabric to create this overlap. This end is sewn under twice so that you don't see the raw edge. And then we stitch all the way around the pillow, turn it inside out, and boom. You could make two pieces that are similar, right, in size, in width, and length to your square, and you could add a zipper. So you could absolutely do a zipper. That's up to you. You could absolutely use a solid piece and then just enclose the whole pillow and never, ever, ever take the cover off. Now, if you're me, I am using my pillowcases over and over again. My husband, God rest his soul, when he was living, he did not take the pillowcases off of the pillows, and he slept all over them. That means he drooled all over every pillow in the house. And so he had to wash it. So I prefer pillow covers because you can wash them and you're not washing all of this. So you'll wash all of this from time to time, but at least you're doing these, and you can change them out. So I can make them for every holiday known to man, every season, every theme, everything that comes up, and then switch them out. And it's, again, a great scrap buster. You could give this as a gift, one pillow, and then all of the tops, let's say for the 4 different seasons at the most, and give that as a gift to somebody, and they can change it out. It's like getting 4 gifts in one. So that's why I prefer some sort of method to get the pillow out of it. And you can see it's like this ugly fabric that I use because nobody's going to see it anyway, because it's going to be covered up with all this gorgeousness. So I scrapped this together just because I made something completely scrappy. I had enough fabric not to make it scrappy this time. But this is the overlay. So we're going to set this aside for a second. It is up to you. I don't believe in taking my quilting supernatural powers and using them for something that somebody's not going to see. So on the back of my quilt, quilted top, nobody's going to see that. So in my mind, there's no reason for me to quilt the back of it. You feel some kind of way and you want to quilt the back of that, knock yourself out. But I'm not doing it. Most of the guides that I looked at for the envelope, what I wanted to do was find one that kind of gave me a formula. They said to take your measurement for the width of it, because this part is going to stay the same because of the way we're going to overlap it. Doesn't really matter because one end is going to stay the same. The other end is the overlap. So if my pillow is 18.5, right? Because that's what it is raw, that top, then I need this part to be 18.5 inches. That's not going to be 18.5 inches. Let me do this. This part is going to be 18.5 inches. This part, I need to be a certain width. And what they're suggesting for that is to take 75% of 18 and use that as the measurement for the width. So this part, length, width, whatever you want to call it, this part is going to be 18.5. This part is going to be about 75% of that. And that gives you enough of an overlay. Again, if you're doing zippers, we're not there because we're doing this for beginners. We're not doing this for advanced. And, everybody can't put zippers in there. And I'm not going to stress anybody out today. But if you know how to put in a zipper and you're following along, absolutely you can use a zipper. Okay, so the first cut I am going to make is my 18.5. I'm using my mat. So because I'm using my mat, I'm going to the 18.5. Lining up my ruler, measure twice, cut once. So I'm making sure it's 18.5. And it is not. That's why you measure twice. See, I got to follow my own advice. Okay, because somebody would have been getting a different piece of fabric because that would have been too short. So 18.5, and we're going to cut that excess off. I'll show you what I do with this in a second. And then I'm going to come down here. I need 2 pieces. This is folded in half. And I'm going to cut right on that 0 line to get my 18.5. Okay. Cool. We said the other measurement was going to be 14. So if I start at 4, I have to go to 18. Just because I'm not starting at the end, and that's no big deal. You start wherever you want as long as you can do the math. If you can't do the math, you better start at 0. Okay, and somebody's got to get up again because I'm going to not do the thing that everybody will be on here talking to me about why are you cutting towards yourself. Okay. Have my 2 pieces. This is that scrap, right? There's not anything possibly I can do with this unless I do a special technique. We're not doing that. If I could figure out what to do with this, then I could use this. If I cannot figure out what to do with these, whoops, I just strip them. And then they go into the pile for later fluff. If I can figure out something to do with these, I'll keep them. Some people use selvage to make projects. And again, that's up to you. Hey, Joshy, which way you want to go with that. Okay. So I'm going to hold on to that for a second. Let me back up for 1 second. And let me make sure. What are you doing? I just joined. Okay. So for anyone who just came in late, we are finishing up the second part of this. So we are making this scrappy patchwork pillow cover. I have already done the top part of it. I'm doing it in purple this time. This was some scraps that I had left over. All of my scraps have been cut into 5-inch squares. So I just cut all of my scraps up, 5-inch squares. I set them off to the side. So whenever I need them, I have them. So I have these down here because I was just working on a purple quilt, but I have them upstairs in other colors. I have them in other prints because then when I need something either to practice with or to make something quick that requires patchwork or even half square triangles because that's what we worked on, this absolutely would be the thing. Okay. Okay. Did I miss a question before I move on? I think I got it. Okay. So here we are. And then the second part of that question. This is the purple that we've done so far. We stitched everything together. We did these in units of 4 patches just because I think it's easier than doing it in units of rows. Everything was quilted. I did not put a backing on this when I quilted it because, yeah, I just decided not to do that. This is the piece, right? And see that just about lines up with the edges. And this is, we're just going to flip this way, right? And then that lines up there, okay? And of course, you can't see the seam right now because, yeah, it's just overlapping. But you can see, let me move it over here. You can see the overlap. So this is edge to edge, and then there's this overlap. And it's a big overlap right now. I could go a little bit lower, but sometimes I find depending on how fluffy my pillows are, it pulls a little. So I'd rather have more overlap than less. But also, we've got to do something with these edges. So we're going to lose some of the edge. So it'll be a little bit closer once we do that. But this should overlap. That's the key part that you want to double check for before you do anything else. So I do make items for other people. I haven't really done a lot of selling, to be quite honest with you. So, but I have, like, yeah, I'm a gifter. I did sell a t-shirt quilt to a friend because I'm getting better at selling some things. Because to be quite honest with you, if you go up into the upper room, and I'm not talking about to meet Jesus, but I'm talking about the upper room in my house. Yeah, there are enough quilts up there that, you know, I could go into business and probably retire. Okay, so with this, to your preference, you're going to turn this under. and then turn this under again so that your raw edge isn't showing. I'm using about 1/4 inch to turn, and then to turn again, and I'm going to press it, but to turn again so that I can take it to the machine and stitch it. But I'm using about 1/4 inch. This would be about 1 inch. You don't really need that much, but that's up to you, and you have enough that you can do it the way you want. But I'm using about a 1/2 inch. If I said 1/4, I meant a 1/2. So it's a 1/2 turn, a 1/2 turn again, and then we're going to take it to the machine and press it, and then we'll take it to the iron and press it, and then we'll take it to the machine and stitch it. And then once we finish that, we just need to sew all the way around and we're done. So again, these are easy projects. This isn't meant to be difficult. And let's be clear, what did we do tonight? We took the time to put all of our pieces together. After we put all of our pieces together, not pieces, let me back up. We auditioned our fabric. So we auditioned all of 16 of those squares, decided how we wanted those to go, in what order. Then we stitched them together by 2s, then stitched the 2s together by 4s. And then we stitched them by 4s, and then we stitched them by 8s, and then the whole thing as a 16 patch. So very simple, very easy. We put everything together. Then we spray basted the fabric to our batting. Could we have used pins or safety pins instead of spray base? Absolutely. Are there some people that if you have a good piece of batting, you could use a glue stick? Yep, somebody does that too. Whatever works for you for the spray basing. I just buy the aerosol can, and I know I'm destroying the ozone, but that's just me. So it's totally up to you which way, you want to go with your basting, however you like. And you could go rogue and do it without basting, and it might work for you, but that's totally up to you. After we basted it, we quilted it. So we actually had enough time tonight to piece, which is putting all of our patches together to make the 16 patch. Then we quilted it, which is what we did next. The only thing that we didn't do for the quilt cycle is to bind. And we're not binding a pillow because I'm not going to be here all night doing that. But we could, to the pillow, add ruffles. We could add piping. Like, there are all sorts of other things that we could do to dress it up. But in the interest of time, we're not doing those fancy things, but you absolutely can do them. Again, this is very beginner friendly. Advanced folks, go at it. Okay, we pressed everything down. We're just going to take it to our machine again. Let me reduce that stitch length back. And I am going to just sew close to this edge just to secure it. For me, when I am sewing, it is all about the seams, depending on what you're making. If there is a lot of stress on the seam, I think in my world, you need a bigger seam, a wider seam. If there's less stress on the seam, you don't need as wide of a seam. So in the quilting world, we use a 1/4 inch seam, because there's not a lot of stretch and pull on the seam, because we're going to quilt down those the quilt top. So because there's not a lot of stress, we can get away with 1/4 of an inch. The pillowcase itself isn't going to have a lot of stress because, first of all, if it's me, it's decorative. But if you feel like, let's say you're giving this to a child and you feel like, you know, they're going to have pillow fights and, you know, because children are what they are, you might be washing it a lot more than you would as an adult, letting it sit on your living room sofa, then you might choose to widen the seam allowance. Again, that's up to you. So it depends on which way you choose to go. Okay. So we turn this under twice and then we top stitch. Well, we didn't top stitch, but we stitched it and we stitched it close to the edge of that fold. Okay. If you felt like you needed some decorative stitches or things like that, knock yourself out. I wasn't doing all that. I have trouble with sewing a straight line. Thank you. Thank you. I try. Thank you. And that lets me know to keep doing things more the way that I am because, you know, folks seem to like that way. So I appreciate your feedback for that. I have trouble sewing with a straight line and like we say, like real wrap. I'm not going to tell you that these lines are 100% straight. I'm not going to tell you that these lines are 100% straight. Again, for the most part, nobody is micro looking at your lines to see that they are not 100% straight, except for the critic. And the critic is not your person. That's not the person you're sewing for. The person who you're giving this this quilted pillow top to, they're like, thank you. This is beautiful. I love the color purple. So you're not worried about that. But you do use there are plates on your sewing machine that you can use that line as a guide. Some people say line it up with the line and then follow your needle. There's all sorts of different methods. Again, you could use masking tape as you could use painter's tape. Masking tape will dry out on your machine. You can use painter's tape and then use that as a guide to help you because it's dark. It's a darker blue opposed to looking at silver and trying to see those lines. There are all sorts of guides that you can get that will help you to keep straight lines. So you just have to find the thing or the tool that will help you to keep that line straight. But again, I'm not going to tell you that all my lines are straight because I would be lying. I'm going to line this up on the edge, right sides together. You know, I will put something down and then go to myself like, where is that? And then right sides together. Okay. Because I like to live dangerously. I like to clip. Because the stuff will shift on you sometimes. And at 10:34, right? We are going to be finished this thing before 11 o'clock. Somebody took a nap, so yes, she is wide awake. Okay, let's try that again. I do like clips opposed to pins just because it's so much easier to clip and pins dull. And some of these pins are vicious. And I'm telling you, when I stick myself, it's like, woo! Okay. Now, we are going to go all the way around this because our opening is here. So we can go all around this with no problem. Again, you're making that decision whether it is a 1/4 inch seam or whether it is a 1/2 inch seam. Let me make sure my foot is tight because that was moving. move my needle position over a little bit so I can get to the seam that I need. And again, I'm just using the plate as that guide. To get that done. My hand is on my fabric, but I am not using my hand to press, to push the fabric forward. My feed dogs on my machine, the teeth underneath of the plate, are what's pushing my fabric or pulling my fabric to the back. This is just helping to make sure that my fabric stays straight so that hopefully my seams are straight. I like to run off the edge because, yeah, I'm not trying to figure out where that measurement is for me. So I just run off the edge. And you can back stitch. It's moving a little slower just because it is running on that batting. So my teeth do want to fight the batting. Hey, Miss Joy. And what I am going to do is I am going to clean this machine after I did this because I know I abused this with the batting. So this batting is called, who knows what it is. I got a big brown paper bag from my local quilt shop of batting. They give away the scraps. Well, they don't give it away. They sell the scraps for the, and yes, I'm back stitching. They sell the scraps for a whole bag of scraps. And I love it because for little projects like this, it is costing me next to nothing because what I would pay for a roll of batting, I can get a whole bag from them. But it just means that I'm either working on smaller projects, or if they have a particular type of batting, I can put it all together if it's the same with a zigzag stitch or with batting tape, and then just make the quilt from that. And again, it would still be cheaper. It just means that it requires me to do a little bit more work to get that done. I will absolutely also usually take my scraps. So if I'm making this for somebody, really, this, other than my time, I say this cost me nothing to make. And the only reason I say that it cost me nothing to make, it cost me something to buy my fabric. But I usually include the cost of the fabric in with the quilt that I'm making. So if my family member asks me to make them a quilt and I have to buy 3 yards of fabric, then they pay for the 3 yards. Now, I mean, I'm not gagging you and buying 3 yards and I only needed 2. So usually if, you know, most quilt designers will say that you need 3 yards, maybe it's closer to like 2 3/4 or maybe 2.5, depending on how you lay it out and what you do. But the person who gets the quilt, they don't want the scraps. So I can then turn around and use those scraps for something. So that's why I say it's free, even though it's really not. But even if I'm giving it to somebody else, I'm not thinking about those scraps for that person. I'm kind of cutting my corners just to reduce some of the bulk. If you feel some kind of way, you can also come in, and you can't really see that stitch. Let me turn this over because you can see it from this side. What I can do is shave a little bit off of the end. And what that does is it helps to reduce the bulk in the corner. So, you know, like sometimes when I think about my scrappy projects, to me, they're like free projects because I've already spent the money. You know, it's just one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's just that. And this is the reason why you do that back stitch, because you are cutting some of this off, but for the most part, you're just trying to get rid of that batting in the seams just a little bit so that you can get a decent corner. Again, these are scraps that I'm going to put in something else. Okay. I think I spoke to Joy. So again, hello, Joy. So we are making this patchwork pillowcase cover. And hey, B. Chantel. So we are making this. We have done everything from beginning to end. So we absolutely started with our squares this evening. The only thing I did was pre-cut the squares. Everything else we did on live. We're going to take this and we're going to start popping this out. I do like to start in my corners. If I need it, I like chopsticks. And I'm just going into that corner. I can either use my chopstick or my little nails. And I'm just pushing those corners in. Okay, now we know that Johnny needs to press this, but Johnny won't press this right now. And really, Johnny could get away with not pressing this, but Johnny will press it. So we're just going to press that out. Okay, and there is our finished pillowcase cover. Okay, now this, because Johnny is also lazy, let me show you what Johnny does. Johnny takes the existing pillow, because this is what Johnny does. And Johnny will put it in here without even bothering to take that off. Now, if this has been on display, yeah, I'll do it. I'm just saying, but for the purposes of right now. And we have to do a little bit of pushing to get it on the other side, but that's what pillows are for. You can refluff them to get them to be nice and tight. Okay, no, make a liar out of me. There we go. And again, I need to press it, so we don't come for me too much because I didn't press it. And I need to fluff my pillow out just a little bit more so that it lays nice and flat. And I wouldn't have that other case in there so that it would stretch out into this the way that it's supposed to. Let me shake some of that down there. So Lori, I'll show you, but no, I do not use so yes, I have some pillows that have a pillow form and I have some pillows. And so here is the final result. So again, I do need to press it because it would make it a lot more crisper, but this is the final result. This is, and again, I just need to shift some of this around in there because it really does lay flat. It's not laying the way that I need it to because of what I have inside of it right now, but I'll show you what that is. But that's how it just pops right in. Let me take this out. Thank you. And I just wish I could show you the quilt doesn't match this. It matches in color, but not the design because of the type of stars that are there. But like I said, unfortunately, it's a pattern test, so I can't show it just yet. You're welcome. Okay. Okay. So let me pull this back out. And like I said, it really does lay flat. It's just that it needs to be pressed. Let me set this aside. And then we have to play. Let me take this one out, right? So inside of here, I used 2 scrap pieces of fabric. My girlfriend went to the thrift shop because she was looking for some fabric. She found these fabric pieces while she was at the thrift store. And this is not a dig to thrift store fabric, because if I ever give all my stuff away, it'll probably go to the thrift store. But I didn't like this fabric. So it wasn't the thrift store fabric, it was this fabric. Okay. So for this is just those two panels. I stitched these two panels together and made my own pillow form. So again, when we're talking about free, right, this was a whole free project. So she donated the fabric to me. I am not a plaid person. So I took the fabric that she had donated to me and I made a pillow. Then I used this to put these on. So I can, and this is what I'm saying, like you could interchange out throughout the year all of your different covers. So you could make 4 covers for somebody, 5 covers, whatever it is, for the seasons or for the holidays. And then they get the pillow and they get the covers. Nobody cares what the pillow looks like because all you're going to do is see the covers. Now, if you use some pretty fabric and they're like, "Oh, I like that," knock yourself out. I whip stitch here to put the stuffing in it. So then the question is, well, Jen, did you use fiber fill? I am going to post this on the YT. So if you're following me there, that link is in my bio. You can absolutely see this. I will post it there. But these are the scraps that I put in there. So after all my projects, I keep the scraps in a bag and then I will stuff the pillow with these scraps. So again, like I don't have to buy, and it's a heavier weight. It's much heavier than if it was like the fiber fill or the pillow form. But if the pillow forms, especially now that there's no more JoJo's, so if pillow forms are, unless you get them from IKEA, if the pillow forms are 10 each, right? Or even if you go to Ross or somewhere like that, if they're 10 each, that's a lot of money for a pillow. Where 2 pieces of fabric, and this is like 2 fat quarters. So 2 fat quarters and some scraps got me this cheaper than those pillow forms. So all the scraps that I have in the house that I could make pillows out of, I can make all of my friends and colleagues a pillow, stuff it with all of the scraps that I have shredded up because I don't have big scraps. So I will take these, shred these up. They go in here. And then once I have that pillow, I actually even have one made already because yeah, I need to get rid of some of this stuff. And then I can just add the cover on top. So like I said, I'm going to give this a good press, starch it up, get it all done, and then this puppy will be finished. So again, less than 2 hours. We didn't make the pillow, so let's take the pillow out. In less than 2 hours, we took all of our squares, we stitched them together, we pieced them together. After we pieced everything together, and we talked about what that looked like, we were then able to add the batting, spray base that down, and then we did our quilting. And you can see I did large quilting. I didn't do anything fancy, and if you were hanging out with me, you absolutely saw how fast it took me to quilt this. And the big quilt wouldn't take much longer. Stitching next to the ditch, I used the foot of my machine for me to determine the width away from the seam. Once we finished that, we sized everything up. So I showed you how to square this up, size it up so that we got rid of the excess batting that was off of the side. We made our 2 panels for the back of this. And again, I would give this a good press so this lays the way that it's supposed to lay. And then we did our hem, and we fold it twice so that it's nice and neat right here. It is raw on the inside. So they are raw, but again, nobody's going to see it. So if you feel some kind of way, absolutely, you could take it to your serger and you could serge this all the way around. Absolutely. So you could serge it if you have a serger at home. Again, if we're talking about beginner sewists, they don't necessarily have that. You could also zigzag around the edges of your seams if you want them to be finished. I don't worry about that because nobody's going to see it. And when they're seeing it, they're putting the other pillow in here and they're not going to see it much longer after that. So all of those things are absolutely wonderful. But again, yes, you measure your pillows. It depends. You want the final size of this. If your pillow is 20 inches, you want the final size of this to be think about what it needs to be finished. So if it needs to be 20 inches finished, that means that your seam allowance, you're going to determine how much seam allowance you need on either side. So if that seam allowance, that extra that's going to be in the seam, is going to be a 1/2 inch, that's a 1/2 inch on this side of this, a 1/2 inch of what's on the bottom. So that's 1 inch on this side, 1 inch on this side. So all the way around, if you do that 1/2 inch, you would add 2 inches, right? No, I said that wrong. It's a 1/2 inch extra. So it's a 1/2 inch on this side, a 1/2 inch on this side. So that makes an inch. So if you need 20, you need 21. And you're going to take those 1/2 inches off. And then so the same way on the back, you know that in one direction you need 21. And then this is what they like to say, 75% of that 21. So it's about 15 inches. So this would be 21. And then you fold, the 15 included the hem. So we didn't need it. So it was 21 by 15. 2 pieces. So you need 2 pieces, 21 by 15. Some people will tell you do one 21 by 15. Some other people will tell you do one 21 by 14. So there's all sorts of different ways that they do it. I would stick with my easy way. I just do them both at 21 by 15 to do that. Your pillow is 24. Again, if it's a 1/2 inch seam, you're going to go to 25. If you choose to do a 1/4 inch seam, then it's a 1/4 inch on each side. That's only a 1/2 inch extra that you need beyond the finished piece. So this is what's called finish, and the seams are what's on the inside. So it just depends on what you're using to be able to make those determinations. Okay, so yes, it would make, like I said, it makes a good gift to change out for the seasons, and it's a quick and easy gift. So this is something that, if you're like me and you have tons of Christmas fabric laying around, you can absolutely take that Christmas fabric and do it. And you're not stuck with the patchwork. It doesn't have to be patchwork. This could be any design that you get to be the desired measurement. So if this is 18 inches finished, I could take a square, and I don't have one close, but I can take a square like this. It's my Christmas square. And I could add a border to get that out to the 18 and a half. And then I can make it I can make a pillow cover from that. So sometimes I'll take what I call my orphan blocks. This is not one, but this is just an example of what I could call an orphan block. I could take an orphan block, and using that orphan block, I can absolutely add a border, or make it a smaller pillow, but I can absolutely add a border and make it into a cover. So I do have other pillows that are around the house in different places that have orphan blocks that I have bordered all the way around. And then I have made it into a pillow cover. I absolutely make pillow covers instead of pillows. When I was younger, I made pillows. And then I found out I had 1,000 gazillion pillows all over the house. And then you have to clean them. So now if I only have 6 pillows around the house, I'm only cleaning 6 pillows, but I can interchange those covers. So I can change the covers out for Christmas. I can change them out for Halloween. I can change them for spring, Valentine's Day, whatever the season is, I can change these out and put something else in its place. What did our grandmothers use to make quilts so heavy? I couldn't tell you what they used, but I will say this. Some of our grandmothers absolutely used different fabrics. So they weren't like, they weren't buying quilter's cotton. real rap, right? So they may be using their husband's, and I just say husband because everybody didn't have a husband, but they may have used their husband's or their brother's work pants. They may have used old army fatigues. Hey, Nina, they may have used all sorts of things that carry a heavier weight than the actual quilter's cotton. So they could have used that. On the inside, they could have used felt. Absolutely. They could have used blankets as batting. They could have used fleece as batting. They would use whatever they could find for batting. So the fabric could have been heavier because, and you absolutely can. There are people who will take baby clothes and will make quilts out of baby clothes. My t-shirt quilt is heavy because my t-shirt fabric is heavier than quilter's cotton. So the layer of the t-shirt plus the layer of the batting plus the layer of the backing makes it heavier. If you're using something like minky on the back, minky is heavier, it's a different type of fleece, but you're going to use that is going to make the quilt heavier. So whatever, they had, you did not hear me one time say you absolutely have to use 100% quilter's cotton. You do want to use something that doesn't stretch unless you stabilize it. You absolutely could use it and not stabilize it, but it's going to stretch. And that might be frustrating for you. But when I make t-shirt quilts, I stabilize my t-shirts. There are people who, when they make t-shirt quilts, they don't stabilize the t-shirt. So, if you stabilize it, now it's the t-shirt, the weight of the t-shirt, plus the weight of the stabilizer combined with everything else. So there are a ton of people who will walk around with a quilt that is very light because of the type of batting they use, versus somebody who has it a lot heavier because of the materials they used. So it just depends on what you're using and what you're going for. What is your ultimate goal? When I snuggle up at night, I want my Sherpa blanket. I love my quilts, but quilts don't necessarily keep me warm at night. And I don't care what kind of batting you use, and I don't care what kind of fabric you use. It's a Sherpa for me because I like that furry feel. It just feels cozy and it helps to make me feel warm. So everybody's different in terms of what they use, but those are the different things that they did use. Okay. Are there any other questions that anybody would have? Thank you again. I think if I can see all the way across the screen over there, we're at 16K. So thank you for tapping the screen. Thank you for following me this evening. Thank you for joining in on the live, interacting as always to share your ideas, to ask questions. I'm always open to answering questions. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Jackie, I just try to pass on whatever information I've been given to other folks so that you can have similar experiences. It's all about sharing the wealth. So, hey, Joseph. So thank you, thank you, thank you again. But like I said, thank you for any of the gifts that anybody has sent there, getting their daily heart me's or anything else like that. It's not about that for me. It is about the love of quilting and getting those things done. So again, check out the Black Sewing Network. We are working on projects all this month for beginners in particular. So my series last week was all around half square triangles. This week it is all about the patchwork. So we did something very simple with patchwork this evening. I will absolutely be working on some other things. So we'll be doing the disappearing 4 patch, the disappearing 9 patch. We will do some other patchwork and as well show you some other projects that you can do. I'm not going to promise that I'm going to go on live to do that, but I will have the videos. So make sure that you are following me here, follow me on Instagram, follow me on YouTube, because that's where I'll be posting those final videos if you want to see those. That's why I don't play music during my videos, so I can post them over on YouTube. So thank you, thank you, thank you again. Have a great evening and a great night. And I really appreciate everyone for today. Thank you, Belinda. Have a good one and have a good evening. I'm going to hit the hay because my principal won't be in school tomorrow, and that means that I got to do some real work. See ya, RV. Have a good one.